which is the problem is like you're shutting yourself and say you can't talk or you can't say what you have to say. But because these conversations that we're gonna have also consequences. Yeah. I think that's the major part, and that's the problem, because we're not just talking for ourselves, we're putting it out on social media. So once we put it out there, other people are getting it, other people are listening to it, and therefore if it is that we are not telling the truth, or we're not being fully open and transparent about everything that we're talking about, or sometimes we have miscommunication or misunderstandings about certain things, and we speak about it based on what we know, our knowledge of it, we're giving other people the wrong information, which can also cause problem in their lives because this is what they heard.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
So you don't want to also be the person's giving up false information or having people that give false information. But if it is like we're having topics and we're talking, okay, these topics that we're speaking about is based on our opinion. I mean, once that is also said, that can make a difference. But if it is that we're not going to do that and say, okay, this is based on just our opinion, no one else's but ours, we make that disclaimer. Because if we don't, then freedom of speech is really not freedom of speech, because we can get in problems. There's a lot of things that can happen once we do that. So it's kind of on walking on eggshells while you still want to be open and talk about certain things. That's just my opinion of it.
That's very interesting. I like that. Actually, I was looking at the possibility that because at the end of the day, all of us actually are good in certain area. Now, all of us cannot be a doctor. All of us cannot be teachers. All of us cannot be scientists. But in one way or the other, we are expert in at least one thing. If we can begin to air our view on that thing that we know, I think more knowledge will be available for everybody.
I agree.
Yeah. Because, up until now, information is still paramount. It's still the most powerful tools that we have around, because that is what, of course, those who control the other people use to control them.
Yes.
Based on what you know, that is upon that you are going to act.
Yes.
So this information have always been passing through a particular tube. It need to come from the other way. It's not real. But today, we don't really live in that kind of world anymore, even though we are really strongly to come out of that type of mentality.
Yeah.
Now, anybody that knows something can say something. I'll give you an instance. I think it should be on the 20th of October last year, when the Nigerian youth were protesting in what was popularly known as the End SARS protest.
Yes.
So when they were in Lagos, the Nigerian government sent the soldiers to quell the protest, and they ended up shooting a lot of people to death. But they denied that they never did it. They denied nothing happened. But how did we know that something really happened? Because the ordinary people that were there showed the picture of what they saw. They video it and they see it, and they show it to the world. But come to look at it, these people are not journalists. They are just ordinary people, just saying what they have seen. And this helped the Nigerian people, to understand what has happened. Because if we have expected the Nigeria News Network, maybe ATA or maybe Channel News to report it, we will never get what really happened. So I think all of us do have a stake in this information flow.
Yes.
That we're able to bring in enlightenment in whichever area that you are. You don't need to be speaking from my area. You need to speak from your area. But if we add yours and mine and the other one to it, then there will be a lot of knowledge around.
Okay.
So having said that, because you are in this sector, and you also said before that you help people to start podcasts, and I thought we want more people to start podcasts so that we can have more voices. What do you see as the challenges on starting a podcast?
Persons are not consistent. The kind of quality work that you're expecting them to put out, people don't want to, because now we're living in a microwave society. People want things to be handed to them. So the kind of work that, you'll put in to make sure you have such a good podcast out, people don't want to do that. People just want somebody else to do it for them and just hear and say, hey, go and talk. and get people. That's really it. Also, I realize that we are more fixated on the numbers. So if it is that we don't have 1,000 people listening to us, it's a problem for us. Not realizing that sometimes these things take time to grow. Not immediately as you start it, you're gonna be now boom and you're gonna be blooming all over the place. It takes a while, especially for podcasts that doesn't deal with certain topics. Because there are certain podcasts that deal with certain topics that will probably get more view because of what they're talking about. So for people who like have educational podcasts, those won't get a lot of views because nobody really wants to know, a lot of people that actually want to sit down and learn something. And to be honest, they want to be more entertained than educated. And that is just the truth about it. So those are some things I'm seeing. In terms of like ideas that people will have, not a lot of people use their imaginations or use some of the tools that they have to create such a good podcast, right? They depend on other people also, again, to provide that information again. So if it is that you're not thinking on your feet, you're not coming up with your own topics, you're not coming up with your own ideas, you're not trying to say, okay, let's ask this question. What is it that we need to speak about that society needs to hear? We don't know the hard questions to ask because we're still depending on other people to do it for us. I think that's where our problem is in podcasting. People don't want to put in the work, and because they don't want to put in the work, they're not consistent. That's the biggest problems I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much for that. I know that you are speaking of your experience. Of course, I'm going to ask you something related to experience also later on before the end of the podcast, because experience actually is the best teacher at the end of the day. And I want to believe that those that are listening to us, they are hearing from the horse's mouth, they say, no? All right. Now, Gloria, tell me. Now, somebody want to start a podcast. What should this person really do in terms of the preparation? How should he get started? Like, what are the things that need to be done to get started?
Okay, first of all, you need to know what your podcast is going to be called. You need to know the niche, if you're going to have a niche to your podcast or not. That is something also that people don't know, that podcasts have niche. So if it is that you want to just talk about sewing, you have a podcast niche for that. If you want to just talk about books, there's a podcast for that. If you want to just talk about the waters or the rivers or countries, there are podcasts for that. So you have to find out the niche that you want to. If it is like myself and you're just going to talk about everything, that means there's no niche for that. So you have to figure out what you're doing. Then what can be helpful is for you to put yourself in some podcast groups to figure out how to go about it. You can learn different strategies from there, how to figure out how you're going to do it. People don't understand that for podcasting, a lot of them comes with figuring out which tool you're going to use to get the podcast done. Whether it's your phone, you have to have a good phone. Which medium you're going to put your podcast on. There are different mediums, so you need to do a lot of research before you even start your podcast to find out, how am I going to do the videoing? If I'm going to do videoing or I'm going to just do voice. How am I going to edit this? Because it's going to have to be consistent. What days of the week am I going to do it? Am I going to do it once or twice? Because after you do the first one, if it is that for some people, they just do a podcast and put it up. Some people, they do the podcast, they edit it, they put whatever they need to put up together and then do it. You're now going to have to learn to be a marketer. Unless you have persons to do it for you, you have to learn how to be a marketer and put your podcast in different areas. You're going to have to learn different streams, how and where to put your podcast. You have different areas. You have the YouTube that we're on. You have the Apple. You have the Purchase. So you have a lot of things. Research them. Get to know how to spread your podcast over the world, so it's not just designated to only one place. Because you don't want your podcast to just be people that's in your house listen to it, or those people just listen to it in a small place. So you need to know that. In terms of how to invite guests, one thing that I've learned and I've heard other people say is it's not always easy to get guests for the show. So prepare yourself sometime for disappointment.
A lot of it.
Because there's so many times that you're going to ask you to come on it and they will probably won't respond. They'll probably say yes and then don't show up. So prepare yourself for the disappointment and always have another plan. Always have a backup plan when you're doing the podcast. Ensure that the days that you're putting it out, you put it out on those specific days. And you put out quality work, quality over quantity. So you can't just putting up 10 podcasts and they're not good. Nobody wants to watch a podcast that's not good. There's a lot of noise in the background. Nobody wants to watch a podcast where people don't even know what they're talking about. It's not flowing. I mean, if other persons are like me, after a couple seconds of it not flowing, I'm tuned out. So you don't want that. You want things that can grab people, because the more they can grab people, the better, or the more people want to listen to it. So those are some of the critical and crucial things for starting the podcast. So make sure that when you put out the quality work, you're consistent with doing it. People want to see consistency. People don't want to see you do something for 3 months and then afterwards you can't be bothered because you never knew the kind of work that podcast has come with it. You never knew.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewafo. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.